Imagine standing on the rim of a volcano, with scorching stone beneath your feet and the ground itself burning at 158 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is heavy with sulfur. Nothing moves here. No insect, no grass, no visible trace of life. It feels completely sterile, as if the mountain has rejected the living world. Now look down into the ancient rock. Geologists say some of it is 5,000 years old, yet the forces capable of melting stone and metal rise beyond 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. So, where does such heat come from in a place where no eruption has ever been recorded? This is Iran, but not the Iran shown on the evening news. Not merely the land of carpets, mosques, and politics. This is another Iran, hidden beneath mountains, deserts, and silence. A civilization stretching back 7,000 years without interruption. Longer than Egypt. Longer than Sumer. Longer than many histories we were taught to believe came first. And yet, many of Iran's deepest discoveries remain scattered, unfinished, or forgotten. Western archaeological teams have barely worked here since 1979, when the monarchy fell and the borders closed to many foreign researchers. French teams connected to the Louvre, excavating since the 1930s, were forced to leave behind layer upon layer of untouched earth. Artifacts now rest in museums from Tehran to Paris, but no one holds the complete picture. Iran is not simply a country. It is a sealed archive. And today, we begin opening 6 of its locks. Our journey starts in the north, where the Alborz Mountains rise like a wall between earth and sky. A few hours from Tehran stands Mount Damavand, 18,406 feet above sea level, the highest point in the Middle East and the tallest solitary volcano in Asia. Its summit can be seen from vast distances, almost perfect in shape, as if carved by an ancient hand. Geologists call Damavand dormant. Official history records no eruption. But the mountain is not silent. At the summit, vents release sulfur and hot gases. At Larajan, springs reach 149 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit, their water thick with hydrogen sulfide. The crater, nearly 1,300 feet wide, holds a small lake that fades in colder months. Local shepherds claim they have seen smoke rising from the summit at night. Scientists call it gas. The shepherds call it breath. Breath of what? The Shahnameh, written by Ferdowsi 1,000 years ago, gives one haunting answer. Inside, Damavand lies Zahak, the Serpent King, a monster with 2 black snakes growing from his shoulders after the devil's kiss. For 1,000 years, he ruled Iran, demanding 2 young men each day to feed his serpents with human brains. The blacksmith Kaveh rose in rebellion. The hero Feridun defeated the dragon. But heaven, according to the old story, would not allow Zahak to be killed. So he was chained to a rock deep inside the mountain. And from that prison, the legend says, came a foul stench that still seeps into the air. A beautiful myth, perhaps. But beneath Mount Damavand, scientists have identified a mass of magma that remains hot. On the 6th of July 2007, sulfur poured from vents near the crater with such force that instruments detected it from a considerable distance. Volcanologists later warned that Damavand may not be extinct at all. It has not died. It is waiting. Waiting for what? Science offers measurements, but not always meaning. And a mountain believed to hold a chained serpent king is not the kind of place that invites peaceful sleep. Now we move 250 miles south into the heart of the Iranian plateau, to the outskirts of Kashan. Here stand low clay mounds that locals call tepe, the Persian word for hill. This is Tepe Sialk. At first glance, it is almost invisible to history. Children play soccer only yards away from skeletons nearly 7,500 years old. In 1933, the French archaeologist Roman Gierschmann arrived here and began digging into what looked like ordinary earth. Beneath it, he found 46 feet of cultural layers, 6 consecutive periods stretching from the Neolithic Age into the Bronze Age. The earliest levels dated to around 5,500 BC. There was painted pottery unlike anything known before. There was a wall of 13 brick rows, standing nearly 5.5 feet high, among the oldest architectural remains in Iran. And there were 2 ziggurats, stepped temple towers raised around 3000 BC, among the rare sacred structures of the Elamite world. But the greatest mystery was not the age of the site. It was obsidian. This volcanic glass can be sharper than a surgeon's blade. Yet the nearest known source lies in Anatolia, in modern Turkey, more than 1,200 miles away across mountains, deserts, and lands that had no roads, no maps, and no wheeled transport as we understand it. Who carried it here? Why did they bring it so far? What kind of forgotten network connected these people 7,000 years ago? At Sialk, archaeologists also uncovered early copper working. Pottery showed snakes, bulls, leopards, and human figures. And by around 3,500 BC, a potter's wheel was already turning in the dust of this ancient place. The artifacts from Tepe Sialk are now scattered across the world. Some rest in the National Museum of Iran. Others are in the Louvre. Still others sit in collections far from the land that gave birth to them. No one has ever stood before the whole story at once. Perhaps that is why Sialk remains one of the most overlooked archaeological mysteries on Earth. 7,000 years of civilization hidden beneath suburban hills, while children play ball above skeletons older than the pyramids. Coincidence? Perhaps. But in Iran, coincidence often feels like a door left slightly open. Our next stop leads deeper into the desert, to Yazd, the ancient heart of Zoroastrianism. About 9 miles southeast of the city, on 2 neighboring hills, stand structures that still make travelers lower their voices. They are silent towers, known as dakmas. Imagine a round stone tower without a roof, rising about 20 feet high. Its brick walls form a perfect circle. Inside lies a flat platform divided into 3 rings, the outer ring for men, the middle for women, the inner for children. At the center waits a deep well. The tower stands on a hill with no permanent stairway. It could only be entered by ladder, and after each visit, the ladder was removed. To the Zoroastrians, a corpse was unclean. It could not be buried in the earth, nor burned by fire, because both were sacred elements. The body had to be returned to the sky. So the dead were laid upon the tower, where vultures stripped the flesh within minutes. The bones were later placed into the central well, where time completed what nature had begun. To modern eyes, it seems grim. But beneath the horror was a severe kind of order. The towers were circular, arranged in concentric rings, aligned with the cardinal directions and built with proportions that feel almost mathematical. Zoroastrianism emerged long before these stone towers took their final form. Herodotus described Persian funerary customs in the 5th century BC, while archaeologists have found bone containers from the same broad era. The towers themselves likely became common later, during the Sassanid period. The Zoroastrians saw themselves as guardians of purity. Some scholars have called their faith the world's first ecological religion. They would not poison the earth. They would not corrupt the water. They would not surrender the dead to sacred fire. But the people who tended those bodies lived under a burden few others could imagine. The Salars, caretakers of the dead, were separated from ordinary life and bound to the towers for the rest of their days. Their world was silence, stone, and sky. They guarded the threshold between the living and the departed, and that threshold was drawn with chilling precision. How did a society without formal geometry as we know it create circles so exact? Why were the bodies arranged in rings? Why did the design seem to echo directions, order, and perhaps even the heavens? Modern scholars offer a practical answer. A circle was simply the most efficient shape for exposure to open air. The three rings allowed the dead to be separated by sex and age. There was no hidden meaning, only function. That explanation sounds convincing from a distance. But inside a dakma at sunset, when the desert wind moves across the stones and the central well waits in silence, logic begins to feel incomplete. The place does not merely look designed. It feels remembered. From there, the journey does not rise toward the sky. It sinks into the earth. A few miles from Kashan, beneath the town of Nushabad, lies a hidden world the modern age only recently rediscovered. In 2004, a local resident was digging a pit in his yard when the ground suddenly gave way. His shovel had opened a passage into darkness. Beneath the house was a tunnel. Beneath that tunnel was another, and below that another still. 3 levels of underground chambers descended nearly 60 feet into the earth. The city's structures belong to a long sweep of Iranian history, from the Sasanian period to the Safavid era. To enter is to move through narrow stone corridors, low ceilings, twisting paths, false turns, and dead ends created to confuse anyone who entered without permission. Some entrances were hidden inside ordinary homes. A family could lift a trapdoor in the floor and disappear beneath the desert. The underground city covers nearly 4 acres. It held rooms, storage areas, toilets, water tanks, and passages connected to ancient aqueducts. Most remarkable was its ventilation. U-shaped shafts carried air between levels without engines, fans, or pumps. Pressure, temperature, and airflow did the work, guided by an intelligence carved into stone more than 1,000 years ago. The official explanation is survival. Nushabad stood in a brutal desert, burning by day and freezing by night. Its people hid from invaders, from Arabs, Mongols, and every armed force that crossed the plateau. The tunnels were used during the Mongol invasions. That much is certain. But some researchers ask a troubling question. If the climate was so brutal and invasions so common, why did the people stay? Why carve nearly 60 feet into stone instead of simply leaving? Legend says that in the 6th century, the Sasanian king Khosrow I, known as Anushirvan, passed through this land and tasted water from a local well. It was so pure, so cold, and so sweet that he ordered a city to be built there. Nushabad, the city of delicious water. Over time, the name became Nushabad. It is a beautiful origin story, but it does not explain the complexity below the surface. The ventilation worked without machinery. The water came from underground sources. The maze of traps, false corridors, and dead ends could confuse an entire invading force. All of it was created without computers, modern plans, or the tools we assume are necessary for such precision. The simple answer may be the most unsettling one. They knew something we have forgotten. From the depths of the earth, we now rise to one of the hottest surfaces on the planet. In southeastern Iran, in Kerman province, lies the Dasht-e-Lut desert. In 2005, a NASA satellite recorded a ground temperature there of 159 degrees Fahrenheit, one of the highest ever measured by satellite. Later, studies suggested the surface may climb even higher, toward temperatures where the land itself seems to enter another state of existence. This is heat beyond discomfort. It is heat that burns bread on stone, heat that turns the ground into a weapon. Dasht-e-Lut stretches nearly 300 miles along the Kubanan Mountains, with a width of about 200 miles and an area close to 20,000 square miles. At its heart lies Gandam Berrian, the burned wheat plain, a region so hostile that life seems to retreat completely. Dark volcanic rocks cover the surface and drink in sunlight. Mountains block the wind. The air barely moves. Heat gathers in silence, trapped like breath inside an oven. But Dasht-e-Lut is not only heat. It is a landscape of giant wind-carved formations, towering dunes, salt flats, and sinkholes. At night, when the temperature falls, wolves move along the edges of this dead world. Iranian explorer Ruhollah Khalegi crossed the central desert with a thermometer in hand. His conclusion was chilling. Exposed skin begins to burn within minutes. Rocks cannot be touched. Pressure builds painfully in the ears. And yet, not far away, across the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, the world changes completely. Hormuz Island, only 26 miles long, rises like a geological miracle. They call it Rainbow Island, and it is no metaphor. Its soil holds dozens of colors: red, orange, purple, pink, yellow, silver, and black. The hills of Hormuz look as though they were painted by a fevered mind. Rainbow Valley, Red Beach, Salt Mountain, the Salt Goddess, Crystal Cave. Every name sounds like legend, yet every place is real. The island is volcanic in origin, rising only about 610 feet at its highest point, but its colors feel larger than geography itself. In 2008, the world's largest soil carpet was created here. Nearly 10,700 square feet formed from earth in dozens of shades. Local people even use the red Gallic soil as a seasoning. When rain falls, it runs down the hills in bright crimson streams, turning the slopes into something that looks disturbingly alive. From a distance, the water resembles blood. Travelers noticed this strange land long ago. Marco Polo passed through the region in 1290 and described unbearable heat. In 1475, Afanasy Nikitin wrote that the sun could burn a man. Geologists explain the island's colors through minerals: iron oxides, sulfur, copper, and other compounds brought to the surface by ancient volcanic forces. In simple terms, the earth here opened itself and revealed its hidden chemistry. But the people of the island tell another story. They say the land was scorched by a weapon from the sky. What weapon? No one knows. The traces look like crystallization. Science has an answer, as science often does. Yet on an island where the soil has 80 colors and the rain runs red, the answer can feel almost too clean. Our final stop is the most unsettling. In western Iran, across the Zagros Mountains and rocky highlands, archaeologists have found carvings that may date from 4,000 to as much as 40,000 years ago. If the oldest estimates are correct, some of these images would reach deeper into time than Europe's most famous cave art. Iranian archaeologist Mohammad Nasserifard documented clusters of rock art in the Khomein region of Markazi province. Made with ochre, black pigment, and tools of stone or bone, these images are part of a vast visual archive. Across Iran, more than 50,000 rock carvings have been recorded. Most show goats, sheep, hunters, bows, and abstract signs. Some symbols appear to echo forms that later developed into ancient scripts. But one image drew particular attention: a small six-legged figure, part human, part insect. Entomologists have suggested it may represent a praying mantis. Yet the creature appears almost human, holding disc-like forms, and its strangeness has stirred controversy. Similar motifs appear in rock art from South America and California. The same eerie posture, the same impossible distance. Was it coincidence? Parallel imagination? Or a sign that ancient humanity was more connected than we dare to believe? And then there are the images that fit no known category. Human figures with unusually large heads, dressed in forms unlike any ancient clothing we recognize. UFO researchers call them spacesuits. Archaeologists call them ritual masks. Who is right remains uncertain. But one truth endures. 10,000 years ago, someone believed these figures had to be carved into stone. Not for crowds, not for decoration. In the silence of the Zagros, they may have been memories, warnings, or messages left for those who would come later. 6 stops. 6 eras. When we step back from these places, Iran no longer feels like a collection of separate mysteries. Damavand, Tepe Sialk, the Silent Towers, Nushabad, Dasht-e Lut, Hormuz, and the carvings of Zagros begin to resemble scattered pages from the same ancient book. One page is written in sulfur and volcanic breath, another in obsidian, carried across impossible distances, another in the geometry of death, the engineering of survival, the silence of deserts, the colors of buried minerals, and the strange symbols carved into stone. If Damavand is only a dormant volcano, why did memory place Zahak, the chained dragon, inside the mountain? If Tepe Sialk was only an early settlement, why does it hold traces of a world connected across more than 1,200 miles before the great trade routes of history? If Nushabad was only a shelter, why was its underground world shaped with such mastery of air, water, deception, and endurance? If the Zagros carvings are only ancient art, why do some figures feel less like decoration and more like messages waiting for a reader who has not yet arrived? Modern humanity has satellites, maps, machines, archaeology, and artificial intelligence. We can scan the Earth from space and measure the heat of a desert without touching the ground. And yet, perhaps, we are still only seeing the surface. Perhaps the missing key is not data, but humility. Maybe our ancestors did not know less than us. Maybe they understood differently, with a mind closer to nature, to rhythm, to warning, and to invisible laws. These mysteries may not only ask how the ancients built, traveled, survived, or remembered. They may ask what modern people have lost. To understand the past, we may need to dig not only into soil and stone, but into ourselves. We may need truthfulness, kindness, patience, and moral cultivation. Perhaps, as human character rises, the old symbols, legends, and markings will begin to speak again. And maybe that is the true mystery of Iran. Not just an ancient country, but an archive of human memory we have not yet learned how to read. If this journey stirred something in you, share your thoughts below and subscribe as we continue searching through the shadows of history, where the past still waits to be understood.